Most of the time in motorsport, and most stereotypically in Formula 1, the best driver in the best car often wins most of the races. Whether it's Max Verstappen's Red Bull, Lewis Hamilton's Mercedes, or Michael Schumacher's Ferrari, especially nowadays, it tends to be the case that unless the pairing in the quickest machine falter either due to their own undoing or due to the car spontaneously combusting, the same people win most of the races in any given season. Even in bygone eras, names like Fangio, Ascari, Moss, Clark and Brabham always rose to the top. However, there are many cases where it's been proven that even if you have all the talent in the world and a bulletproof car to boot, things can still go wrong. Mika Hakkinen lost a win at the 2001 Spanish Grand Prix during the final season before his sabbatical when his engine died on the final lap. Jim Clark was on his way back through the leading pack of cars at Monza in 1967 after having fallen a lap down earlier in the race before his car spluttered to a halt on the last lap, having run out of fuel. Clark also lost a World Championship at the Mexican Grand Prix in 1964 when an oil line burst on his car coming across the start-finish line to begin the final lap of the race. These three examples are some of the most memorable unlucky moments in F1 history, where drivers lost their chance at a race win due to factors completely outside of their control. However, there is one driver who's known more than Clark, more than Hakkinen, and more than anyone really, for being in the wrong place at the wrong time in most situations. He had some of the strangest retirements ever and never got a race win in Formula 1, despite definitely being a high enough caliber driver to do so. Let me tell you the story of Chris Amon, the unluckiest driver in F1 history.
Juan Manuel Fangio is in the lead on the last lap of the German Grand Prix.
Jim Clark drives the Formula One Motorsport to victory on the racetracks of the world.
And look at that! Out that, and colossally, that's Mansell. That is Nigel Mansell. Alain Prost has taken the advantage. Senna is trying to go through on the inside, and it's happened immediately. This is amazing. Senna goes off at the first corner.
And I've got to stop because I've got a lump in my throat.
Christopher Arthur Amon was born on the 20th of July 1943 in Bulls, New Zealand. He attended a school which I won't even try to pronounce, and thanks to his parents being wealthy sheep farmers, he was exposed to a much slower form of motoring than racing, as he was only 6 years old when he was taught to drive by one of the farm's workers on the field. His first taste of motor racing came when he left school and persuaded his dad to buy him an Austin A40 Special when he entered local minor competitions and hill climb events, along with practicing back on the farm. He quickly made his way up through the ranks, driving a 1.5 litre Cooper and a Maserati 250F, but rose to recognition when he was driving a Cooper T51, which fellow Kiwi Bruce McLaren took to victory in a 1959 United States Grand Prix at Sebring. He entered the 1962 New Zealand Winter Series as a privateer, but was picked up by Scuderia Veloce partway through the campaign. At the race at Lakeside, Amon impressed, and one of the track marshals that day was ex-Formula 1 podium finisher Reg Parnell. The man who stood on the podium at the 1950 British Grand Prix persuaded the fast New Zealander to come and race for him and his team back in the UK, and going into 1963, Amon continued to show his talents in pre-season races at Goodwood and Aintree. His debut Formula 1 race would see him paired with the two-time Grand Prix winner and veteran Maurice Trintignant, who had been racing since the first season of the sport in 1950. The Kiwi qualified 15th out of 17 cars on the grid for the opening round in Monte Carlo, but was unable to start due to a peculiar reason. There was a rule in place for the Monaco Grand Prix only that all previous winners of a race were guaranteed to start, regardless of how they qualified. Since Trintignant had won the 1955 and 1958 editions of the prestigious event, he was thus confirmed on the grid. However, before the last qualifying session, as there were 3 segments back then, the Frenchman's car developed terminal problems and thus Amon was forced to hand his car over to his teammate due to the previous winner's rule being in place. This denied him a Grand Prix debut in the Principality, but he would start the next round in Spa. He outqualified new teammate Lucien Bianchi, yes, related to Jules, and then had an oil leak which forced him to retire. Amon was his team's only entry in Zandvoort, but had water pump failure. Then in Reims, was partnered by a returning Trintignant, an American, Maston Gregory. The rookie took his first ever race finish in 7th place, narrowly missing out on points and also beating Trintignant on his home turf. He claimed 7th again in Silverstone before retiring from an accident on the Nürburgring Nordschleife. During this time, Amon was gaining notoriety off track too, as he had shared an apartment with future race winner Peter Revson and three-time podium finisher Tony Maggs. The trio became known as the Ditton Road Flyers. During qualifying for the Italian Grand Prix at Monza, Amon crashed going through the Lesmo corners, which left him hanging out of the car, having broken 3 of his ribs. He was hospitalised and missed both the Italian race and the next at Watkins Glen. He returned nearly 2 months later for the event in Mexico, but retired with gearbox failure. Then his team, Reg Parnell Racing, didn't turn up to the season finale in South Africa. Amon had shown promise in his debut campaign, but had a few instances of bad luck that prevented him from showing his full potential. Going into the 1964 season, he continued to impress during the non-championship rounds before the Monaco Grand Prix with several top 5 finishes. Reg Parnell Racing changed over from Lola chassis to using the revolutionary Lotus 25, but Amon failed to qualify for the first race of the season in Monte Carlo, only 1 position and 4 tenths away from the cut-off to get into the event. However, at the second race in Zandvoort, after qualifying 13th, the Kiwi scored his first F1 points by driving up to 5th place, a lap behind the race winner Jim Clark. But that was as good as it got, as in the rest of the year, he only finished 2 more races, getting 10th in Rouen and 11th on the Nürburgring Nordschleife. A mix of mechanical failures blighted the rest of his results, and he again missed the Italian Grand Prix at Monza. If 1964 was bad, however, 1965 was awful, as his team's engine suppliers BRM insisted that the Brit Richard Atwood be the number 1 driver. With Inez Ireland also joining the outfit, Amon could only compete in 2 races, deputising for his colleague that had been injured in an accident, replacing Atwood at Sherrard and at the Nürburgring Nordschleife, both of which attempts ended in retirement. However, during the season, he'd been signed up by Bruce McLaren with the idea that he'd drive for his eponymous team, but problems with acquiring a second engine to go into Amon's chassis scuppered any chances he had at a good year. These problems persisted going into 1966, and he did not attend 4 of the opening 5 rounds of the season. However, he did go to the French Grand Prix for Cooper, replacing the outgoing Richie Ginther, who'd gone to Honda. It was planned that Amon would see out the rest of the season with Cooper, but when 1964 world champion John Surtees became available, they dropped the Kiwi, meaning he'd now been ousted by 3 teams in the space of 2 years. He was ousted by Reg Parnell in favour of a British driver, he was ousted less flagrantly at McLaren because of logistical issues, then he was ousted by Cooper because of John Surtees. Admittedly, all of them weren't entirely anyone's fault, but Amon's perennial unluckiness that would rear its ugly head later in his career was still in effect long before. He also entered the Italian Grand Prix in a privateer Brabham under the banner of Chris Amon Racing, but failed to qualify. However, even if his Formula 1 stint in 1966 was underwhelming, elsewhere he showed his potential. At the Le Mans 24-hour race, he was driving a Ford GT partnering Bruce McLaren and beat one of the other Fords driven by Ken Miles and Denny Hulme in a photo finish. After his performance, beating the Ferrari team in an event later depicted in the film Le Mans 66, Il Commendatore, Enzo himself, invited Amon to the Ferrari family home and signed a deal with him to race for the Scarlet team. However, despite attaining the best drive of his career to date, the bad luck he had previously continued following him. While on his way to the pre-season race of champions at Brands Hatch, Amon crashed his road car and had to withdraw from both that race and the first round of the F1 season in Kyalami. At the second round in Monaco, he struggled in qualifying but finished in 3rd place to claim his first Formula 1 podium finish. Unfortunately for the Kiwi, this amazing result was overshadowed by a tragedy. On lap 81 of the 100-lap race around the Principality, his teammate Lorenzo Bandini clipped the inside barrier at the seafront chicane with his rear tyre, causing his car to overturn after hitting a lamp post. Bandini was trapped inside after his car caught fire on the straw hay bales, and after initially being pulled from the burning wreckage, succumbed to his injuries 3 days later in a Monaco hospital. He was 31. After taking 4th in Zandvoort, things got much worse for the Scuderia when Mike Parks broke his legs in an accident at Spa, where Amon took another 3rd place. Following the career-ending and fatal crashes that had befallen his colleagues, the 1966 Italian Grand Prix winner Ludovico Scarfiotti, who just so happened to still be one of the Ferrari works drivers, retired from motorsport, leaving Amon as the only one left racing for the team. Scarfiotti later retired, but never competed in Formula 1 again and died in an accident during a hill climb event in 1968, aged 34. Meanwhile, after the removal of his teammates from the picture, Amon retired from the race on the Le Mans Bugatti circuit, then took 2 more third places at Silverstone and the Nürburgring Nordschleife. His 6th place in Mosport was the last points finish he scored in 1967, and overall in the Drivers' Championship, despite never finishing any race higher than 3rd, he was 5th. Heading into 1968, many of the top drivers in Formula 1 geared up for the season by competing in the Tasman Series across many races in Oceania. And although Jim Clark took 4 wins and the crown at the end of the 8 rounds, Amon won the first 2 events, including the New Zealand Grand Prix. He could have won the final round at Sandown Park as well, but was pipped to the post by Clark. Going into the F1 season, Lotus boss Colin Chapman had designed rudimentary aerofoil wings, as he came up with the idea by inverting the devices that kept planes flying in the air and sticking them onto a race car to produce the opposite of lift, that being downforce. Despite his clever innovation, wings had still been used on other race cars well before the 1968 season, just not in Formula 1 and not properly, and not with any great success. Amon began testing wings with Ferrari's chief designer and underrated F1 figure Mauro Forghieri, but only finished 4th in South Africa. Then at the next race in Jarama, the Kiwi took pole position by 0.2 seconds to second place Ricardo Rodriguez and led 31 laps on race day. However, do you remember how earlier in his career, Chris had historically had bad luck, not necessarily in the driving seat, but instead getting stiffed out of good drives due to factors outside of his control? Well, here, the tide started shifting back to driving seat unluckiness, as his fuel pump failed on lap 57 out of 90 of the race. This allowed Graham Hill to win the first race for Lotus after the death of the late Jim Clark, so I suppose there's a positive to everything. Then Ferrari missed the Monaco Grand Prix, the reasons for which were never fully confirmed. However, Amon himself believed it was a carryover from the trauma of the previous year's race where Bandini had died, and maybe Enzo didn't want to tempt fate. His New Zealander driver was offered a seat by Ken Tyrrell for the race, but was vetoed from taking part in it by Maranello. Then at Spa, he qualified on pole by 4 seconds on the 14-kilometre lap. However, after bursting away from the pack on the opening tour, he was held up by a slow Joe Bonnier, who allowed John Surtees to pass him, and Amon was unable to re-overtake the Englishman because although the Ferrari was fast in the corners, the Honda was too fast on the straights. Then on lap 8, Surtees flicked up a stone that punctured Amon's radiator and forced him to retire. It was now 2 lost wins from as many pole positions for him. Then at Zandvoort, he took his 3rd pole position on the year, but again had bad luck as the changeable conditions didn't suit his Firestone tyres and he lost several minutes around 2/3 distance due to a lengthy pit stop. That's 3 from 3 unlucky pole position races. Then at Rouen, Amon just had a bad day, dropping from 5th on the grid to 10th at race's end. Then at Brands Hatch, he qualified 3rd behind the Lotus pair of Graham Hill and Jackie Oliver, and during the race dropped to 4th behind Joe Siffert. When Hill and Oliver dropped out of contention, Amon was pressuring Siffert, but had the same problems as in Spa, where Chris had better speed in the corners but couldn't overtake on the straights. That's 4 potential wins lost as he came home for the first runners-up place of his career when his tyres went off towards race's end. He qualified 2nd on the Nürburgring Nordschleife but had an accident on race day while chasing Graham Hill, and Jackie Stewart went on to win by 4 minutes. After Ferrari had debuted centrally mounted aerofoils earlier in the year, Matra had pioneered a system where the driver could change the wing angle via a pedal in the cockpit in order to maximise downforce in the corners and reduce drag in a straight line. Ferrari began using their own approach to these movable aerodynamic devices at Monza, where the engine oil pressure controlled which position the rear wing was in, and Amon qualified 3rd at the Temple of Speed, before running in the front slipstreaming pack through the opening portion of the race. However, as he went through the Lesmos on lap 9, his new wing system leaked fluid onto the rear Firestone tyres, and the resulting accident sent him flying into the forest on the outside of the corner. The Kiwi had been removed from the cockpit in the crash, and was hanging from a tree branch by his harnesses, with his car parked perilously above him. Don't ask me how he ended up like that, he just did. He was helped down from his precarious predicament by a nearby marshal with a knife to cut him down, which surprised onlookers when they saw him walking about, because they believed he'd been another Grand Prix driver killed in the deadly year of 1968. In the Canadian Grand Prix at Mont Tremblant, Amon qualified on the front row and equalled the pole position time sent by Brabham's Jochen Rindt. He led from lap 1 and at points was more than a minute clear of the pack behind. However, his clutch had been playing up all race long and he was having to shift without it. When his final drive pinion broke with 18 laps left and forced him into the pits to retire, it was probably the most concrete of winning chances he's had to date. He struggled in the Watkins Glen race, then at the final round in Mexico City, retired again from the front row. His season was characterised by lost potential, having taken 3 pole positions which he could have won from, along with 3 other races where he retired from a good standing. He stayed with Ferrari going into 1969 and won both the New Zealand and Australian Grand Prix and the Tasman Series, but in F1 his year started off like he'd ended the one prior. He suffered from engine failure in Kyalami, then qualified on the front row of the grid at Montjuic Park. Jochen Rindt crashed from the lead as his rear wing failed, which handed the advantage to the perennially unlucky New Zealander. But guess what? His engine seized on lap 56. Now, I understand that reliability rates were so poor in this era of Grand Prix racing, but it's comical how he always lost out from good positions due to no fault of his own. He had differential failure from second place in Monaco, then took his first point and first podium of the year in Zandvoort. At Gerard, he qualified 6th but retired due to engine failure. However, after another retirement in Silverstone, Amon had grown tired of the helpless unreliability of Ferrari's V12 engine when compared with the Ford Cosworth DFV, so he decided to leave the Scuderia for pastures new, missing the rest of the 1969 season and joining March for 1970. It's so ironic that in the coming years, that Flat 12 would become one of the most iconic engines of the next decade, although the DFV, in itself, has probably become the singular most iconic engine in F1 history, spanning like 15 years as a competitive entity, before fizzling out completely in the late 80s. The March chassis was competitive from the off in the manufacturer's first year in F1. Amon equalled Jackie Stewart's pole time and started second, but retired within 14 laps with overheating issues. He struggled to 6th on the grid in Jarama but retired with engine failure on lap 10, then at Monaco retired with suspension problems from second place. He also had another issue with his car, as he was given the number 18, which he demanded was changed, as that was the integer that his ex-Ferrari teammate Lorenzo Bandini had adorned on his car when he crashed and died at the same venue 3 years earlier. He eventually raced with the number 28 after his protests. Then at the last Belgian Grand Prix held on the 14-kilometre layout of the Spa circuit, he led a handful of laps at the start, set the fastest lap of the race and finished second to Pedro Rodriguez. He retired with clutch issues on lap 2 in Zandvoort, then took another second place in Gerard. He only finished 5th in Brands Hatch, but was outperformed in qualifying by the Swedish starlet Ronnie Peterson. He had a conflict with Max Mosley, as he'd not been paid 3/4 of his salary, and thus was given subpar engines at the Österreich Ring and at Monza, where he finished outside of the points. After 3rd in Mosport, a puncture robbed him of a victory in Watkins Glen in the opinion of the team's car designer, Robin Hurd, where he eventually finished 5th. He was 4th in Mexico City, but disagreements between Amon and the higher-ups at March led to him leaving to go and join the Matra team for 1971. As was common for Amon in previous years, he showed good form in pre-season by winning the non-championship Argentine Grand Prix. A front-row start at the F1 opener in Kyalami was converted to a 5th place in the race, then he scored a 3rd place at Montjuic Park before a mediocre performance in Monaco. He continued to struggle in the coming races, only finishing 1 of the next 4 events, at Paul Ricard where he was 5th, and at the Nürburgring Nordschleife he crashed out and this sidelined him for the Austrian Grand Prix. He qualified on pole in Monza and led parts of the race, but when he went to tear off one of his visor strips, he tore off the whole thing, which forced him to slow down to avoid having a massive crash and meant he missed out on the 5-way photo finish that saw Peter Geffen take his only Grand Prix victory. Mediocre results of 10th and 12th in the North American leg at the end of the season meant Amon scored only 9 points, having missed out on yet more wins through no fault of his own. He stayed with Matra for 1972, and after it did not start in Argentina, 15th in South Africa, and a retirement in Jarama, he scored 6th in both Monaco and Nivelles Ballers, getting fastest lap in the latter. He returned back to the front in Gerard, however, as he took pole and led the opening 19 laps, until he became one of 10 drivers who got punctures driving over the stones flicked up from the side of the track as the extinct volcano that the track went around had shedded rocks which made it more treacherous than ever before. The punctures, along with helmet marker losing an eye to the stones, necessitated in Gerard being removed from any future F1 calendars. Amon had lost another victory, although he recovered to 3rd after a sterling drive saw him set the fastest lap and the track record. 4th in Brands Hatch, 5th at the Österreichring, and 6th in Mosport with the remaining points scores he took in 1972. However, the New Zealander was left looking for a new drive for 1973 as Matra ended their Formula 1 commitments. He had talks with March for a return to the team, but that drive went to Jean-Pierre Jarier, so he signed for a third young team in as many years, called Techno. However, this stint proved to be abysmal. The team had 2 different car designs on the go, and it took until the 5th round in Zolder for one to be ready to race. Amon raced to 6th place there, then retired with overheating in Monaco. He refused to drive the car in Sweden and Paul Ricard due to arguments about the direction in which design should have gone, then he retired in Silverstone and Zandvoort. After not starting the Austrian Grand Prix, he finally quit the team, having had enough, then drove a third car for Tyrrell in Canada, only finishing 10th, before the team withdrew from the season finale in Watkins Glen due to the death of Francois Sever. For 1974, having bounced between 9 teams since his F1 debut, the Kiwi revived the eponymous outfit Chris Amon Racing, taking one of the Techno designers with him. However, problems emerged as they missed the first 3 events in Argentina, Brazil and South Africa. He qualified 24th and retired with brake trouble in Jarama, then missed Zolder before returning in Monaco, qualifying 20th but failing to start due to more mechanical problems. Amon next attempted the Nürburgring Nordschleife but failed to qualify after setting a time slower than he set during qualifying for the 1968 race when he was still driving for Ferrari. Another failure to qualify in Monza sealed the fate for his team as financial difficulties forced it to close down, and he joined BRM for the final few races in 1974, getting a best result of 9th in Watkins Glen. It was later revealed by Amon that he was offered a seat at the Brabham team before the season started, but turned this chance down. He didn't get a drive initially in 1975, but signed on for 2 of the last 3 races of the year with the relatively new Ensign team after representing them in F5000. 2 12th places at the Österreichring and Monza were all that came that season, but in 1976 he continued with the team. Amon scored 5th place in Jarama after a rapid improvement under team boss Mo Nunn, and he was looking good in Zolder until his wheel failed and caused a crash. He qualified 3rd in Sweden, but retired from a potential podium place when his suspension went on lap 38 and sent him into the barriers. He'd had 2 big accidents in quick succession, and thus missed the French Grand Prix before returning at Brands Hatch, where he ran 4th before a water leak forced him into another retirement. After qualifying a lowly 17th on the Nürburgring Nordschleife, the race was stopped following Niki Lauda's fiery crash. Amon opted not to take the restart for his own safety, and he was then fired by his team boss, Mo Nunn. He initially chose to retire from racing, but soon after was contacted by Walter Wolf and agreed to do the Canadian and United States races for his team. He showed promise in Mosport, but another big crash in qualifying, where he was again unlucky to come away unharmed, meant that he didn't take part in either race he'd planned to. He chose not to continue in F1 in 1977, but did drive for Wolf in Can-Am, although only briefly, as he only did 1 race, saying he just wasn't enjoying it anymore. He promptly retired from all forms of racing, although he did make a one-off return in 2003 at a rally in New Zealand with Maury Walker as his navigator. 1 left, into 2 right, into 3, and 4, and 5 lights, and it's go, 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 fantastic! But seriously, Amon was a very good driver. It's maybe a bit uncanny that a driver as unlucky as him, who could have won about 10 races, turned out to have a 13-year career driving for 13 different teams. I think it was Mario Andretti who said that if he became an undertaker, people would stop dying, although Amon rebutted any idea that he was unlucky by pointing out that he had been the catalyst of his own downfall at times, constantly switching teams and being generally quite arrogant. He also pointed out the several big accidents that he had that could have easily killed him throughout his career. He was definitely unlucky as he deserved a race win much more than others from his era like Giancarlo Baghetti and Peter Geffen, but that's just how the cookie crumbles sometimes. He had World Championship winning potential, but people nowadays just look at the big fat donut in the wins column of his Wikipedia statistics. He had wins elsewhere, just not in F1, and it's as if he was purposely inventing new ways to get screwed over. Like, come on, pulling your whole visor off? Although, to be fair, I think either David Coulthard or Martin Brundle said that was possible even when they were racing. It's still a funny story nonetheless. Amon is never remembered by newer fans as other race winners from the 1960s and 70s are, which is a shame. Only those who are versed in F1 history know about him, and newer fans only tend to know individual examples of his bad luck and nothing else. However, he's one of about 4 or 5 pioneering Oceanian drivers from either Australia or New Zealand that put their continent on the map in the early days of F1. Anyways, with that being said, I think that ends today's video. I hope you enjoyed me looking at the unluckiest career in Formula 1 history, and if you did, please remember to like, comment and subscribe for more of my content in the future. Big shout out to my Patreon subscribers Andy Lamberts, Eamon Al-Dowdy and Jack Bassett, and if you'd like to see videos before they go live on YouTube or just want to support the channel, you can subscribe to the Patreon with the link in the description for as little as $1 per month. You can also follow my Instagram where I occasionally post behind the scenes content, but with my shameless plugging out of the way, that concludes today's broadcast. I'm Nedzo, and I'll see you all later. Bye!